Hello. Now that winter's over, or mostly over here in Indiana, I wanted to shoot a few videos about some cars that I had to deal with this winter that I think could be of interest and might be of some help. The first one I want to talk to is about a car I had to send to shop. I've got 5 videos that I shot with my phone and that I added to my OTMA application, the whole process to identify. But what it amounted to is a car came to my place. We were doing readings on a series of cars that got placed under the towers. And the man working with me, he's taking readings on this car, and he calls me over and says, "Hey, you need to come over here and look at this." So I get over there and I said, "What is it?" He said, "I was trying to take off the cap off the thermometer well, and it wouldn't move by hand." So he puts a 12-inch crescent wrench on it and begins to back it off. Well, it did not surprise me nor him that we had to use a wrench on this, because this year has been one of the worst years for rail cars coming from this one particular refinery that's been sending us cars. They have been horrible. The number of stuff that they have done, it's just stupid stuff. They regularly tighten down the caps on the thermometer wells and the outage gauge so tight that on several of these cars I've had to use a 24-inch adjustable wrench just to get them to move. Not to mention the number of plugs in the sample line valve that these guys have totally destroyed. Just destroyed. Threads are ruined. Some of them, those plugs are driven in so tightly they cannot be safely removed. You just can't do it. Not to mention the fact that they are tightening down the handles on these sample line valves to where even using a 12-inch crescent wrench on a few of them can't get it to move. I don't know what the hell their problem is, but they have been consistently doing this entire winter. So when the guy working with me tells me he needs to use a wrench to back off a cap that should only be hand tight, it didn't surprise me initially. Didn't surprise him either. So what happened is he grows in there, puts on a wrench, begins to unthread it by hand after that point once he got it to move. And once he got past, the cap got past the O-ring, the cap just popped right off. And the only thing keeping it from coming up and actually hitting him was the chain. He said, "You need to come over here and look at that," and he explained it to me. And you look down in there and you could see a little bit of glycol antifreeze down inside the well. I said, "Don't do anything, man, just wait. We're going to prove whether that thing's leaking or it was just a fluke." So I go and grab a bottle and I pour it in there, fill it full. And of course, when you add liquid into a tube like that, you're always going to get some bubbles. So I would fill it, wipe the excess bubbles off, filled it again. And then the first video that I'm going to show, I've got 3 of them I shot that day, which would have been December 2nd. The first video was about 12 minutes, 13 minutes after I first poured in the glycol. And then the other ones were just follow-ups after that.
That's a big bubble.
And this is like the 4th car that I've had in about 2 years where propane is leaking into the thermometer well. and 3 of them have already gone to shop. And in a roundabout way, through some other people, the word got back to me that, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're talking about. This guy does not know what he's talking about. Propane isn't going to leak through a thermometer well. What your guy doesn't realize is these cars get pressured up with nitrogen in a shop, and that's all it was just nitrogen leaking out the thermometer tube. So it really wasn't propane. And I'm like, oh, that is so stupid. That is such garbage. Yes, they do pressure up rail cars in a shop, pressure them up with nitrogen before they ship them out to make them safe. But how stupid do you think I am that they're actually going to be charging up the thermometer well with nitrogen also? They aren't going to. They didn't do it. So part of the reason in the second 2 videos that I shot, I ran a sniffer gas detector to prove that what was coming out of the thermometer well was actually propane. So anyway, when you'll see these videos, you'll see how it's bubbling up. And another thing I was also told was, well, this guy, he's so dumb, he doesn't realize that when you pour liquid into a tube, it's always going to bubble. And it's like, well, no shit. It's like, I've been doing this for over 30 years. It's like, I don't know that. Well, what it amounts to is nobody wants to take any responsibility. Nobody wants to do anything. And so it's easier to blame somebody than it is to just actually do an investigation and find the problem. So that's why when I shot it, we waited. I set a timer on my phone, and I filled it up the first time, wiped it off, filled it up a second time, wiped off the excess bubbles, and it was just rolling. The bubbles were just rolling pretty badly. So I set a timer on the phone, waited till that was done. The volume had dropped down inside the thermometer well, so I add even more, wipe the bubbles off, let it settle, add more, and then that's when you'll see the first video. Second video is a follow-up, third one's a follow-up. The next 2 were shot the next day. All right, it's Friday, December 3rd. It's a little after 8 in the morning. I'm back out here at car CTCX 780367. I'm going to reconfirm that this thermometer well leaks. I'm going to back this off, see if it's pressurized or not. Hear that? It hissed. Didn't pop like it did yesterday for Andrew, and as you can see that my fluid level's gone down again. I brought out my hydrocarbon detector, and we're going to put it over this. As you can tell, it picks up propane. I'll change the sensitivity on this. Let's try it again. There's no doubt there is propane vapor coming out of there, and now I'm going to get a piece of rebar, and I'm going to check how deep that antifreeze is. This is about how deep it is from the top of this nipple to the top of this pressure plate. So I'm going to lower this down. I think the leak is about where this tube welds onto the pressure plate. Comes out dry. Let's go a little bit deeper. It's wet. So that's about how far down it appears. So it's about 6 inches or so down is where my antifreeze is sitting. And that's when I proved again that it is leaking in through the thermometer well, and the thermometer well is pressuring up. And I am convinced that with this, as with the others, the real problem is where this thermometer tube is attached to the pressure plate. I am convinced that that's where the leak is. So, just wanted to show you what I ran into, how I troubleshooted it, so hopefully it's a good lesson in either what to do or what not to do. But at the end, I have to protect myself. Because these same people that would want to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, or you're making too big of a deal of it, are the same people that would also try to blame if there really was a problem down the road. And they would also be the ones that tried to say, well, you should have caught that. You should not have allowed that to happen. So it goes back to something else that I've mentioned before here, and it's always protect yourself. Always look out for your own best interest. Document things, photographs, video, just writing it down. Just write it down. That way there's some sort of a paper trail of anything that you ran into. Better to be too cautious than too oblivious. I also have another car. I'm going to attach 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 pictures of. This car showed up at my place, and it was in with a string of like 12 other cars. Showed up, and my standard operating procedures say that I need to do my initial car inspection as soon as practicable whenever the cars arrive. So the cars arrived a little bit after midnight. I go out there in the morning and I'm walking around checking them. And you'll see the pictures on this one car. This end where the drawbar is was just covered in scrap pieces of galvanized steel. It looks like from leftover production scrap is really what it was. They had stamped out sheets of galvanized steel to make something, and it was covered. You couldn't miss it. Some pieces were as long as my forearm, and others were just little round dots, just leftover scrap from production. And it covered that whole end where the drawbar is. I'm telling you, anybody walking within 6 feet of that car who had their eyes open had to have seen it. No one admits to seeing anything. It somehow, from the time it got dropped off until I looked at it, the scrap metal fairies came out and they just dumped a bucket load of scrap right on top of that car, I guess. But I also know this for a fact, that if that car would have left my place and had that scrap on it and been caught, they would accept no excuse from me. They would want to blame me and fine me and hold me accountable for a pile of scrap metal, because of course that's a health and safety risk to all the people that work in the railroad. Yet it wasn't such a big health and safety risk that they could be bothered to have caught it before it came to my place. It's just kind of how the way the world works. So I just took pictures of it, documented it, and then I went and took a 5-gallon bucket, and then I use a magnet. I've got a magnet on an extension pole that I use to clean up scrap around this place. And I used it, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and I got a picture of the 5-gallon bucket. It weighs approximately 15 pounds of scrap metal that I got off the end of that car. And this is also why I always wear PPE when I do rail car inspections. You don't know. And when you walk around and you find that much scrap metal just laying there in the open, what are the odds there might be scrap metal up on the top of the car, waiting to slide down and fall on you? I don't know. Sometimes the way my luck runs, probably a high chance. Now on this car there wasn't any, it was just right there. And I got a feeling that there's something going on around in there, because this is the fourth time this year I've had a car come in that's had some sort of the same type of scrap metal on it. I don't know if the railroad is citing this car near something. I don't know. All I can do is speculate, and that's kind of useless. But I do know that we have to look and do our inspections and find these things and clean up after other people. So I documented it, sent it forward, and I just found it was interesting, and I just wanted to share some of those pictures with you. Maybe you've had something similar, something worse. So then again, I just want to encourage you that when you go out and do this stuff, don't always assume anything. Just keep your eyes open, look for stuff. Thank you.